Special greetings to you, Lawrence and Joan. How are you this evening?
Well, thank you. Nice seeing you.
I'm fine, thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you so much. This is a continuation of our training here for editors and writers in the capital city of Zimbabwe, that is Harare. And we are so excited to be joined by renowned authors. And we're a bigger group here, and I would allow them to greet you in a special way. So, the guys at the back, could you kindly make a resounding noise to our guest tonight?
Thank you.
Yes, also to our online audience, thank you so much for joining us. This is a special moment for us. We had a one-on-one training here, and you know what? There's been so much energy, so much of exuberance, and I'm looking forward to greater exchanges and submissions from you. And to our online audience, I hope you're doing well, everyone. You know, we have different countries that are joining us. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for being patient. And tonight, we are graced with big authors. The authors that I love, Joan Campbell, I've seen her at the last Lit World conference in Hungary. Thank you so much for being here tonight. And Lawrence Damin, I was talking with him earlier on. I said, Lawrence, when I grow up, I just want to be like you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
All right. So short introductions. Lawrence is a Ghanaian author, poet, and he has had awards after awards for authoring and writing these quality books. And I'm so excited as a young man to be hosting him, and as a person that looks up to him, it's an honor and a privilege. And Joan, you know what? I've been reading your book that I bought from you, eh? I love it. Yeah.
Good.
So Joan Campbell, she's an author from South Africa, Johannesburg. She has also had a fair share of her own awards. And thank you so much for being here with us tonight. And the first question to you guys is, let's talk about this process when you are dealing with a publisher, right? What is the process like when you're going through a traditional publisher, and what was your experience, especially in your first book?
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me. And greetings again to all of you participants. And the question has to do with writing my first novel and published by a traditional publisher. This was way back in 1988 when I was studying in Kenya. And I had been writing. I had a newspaper column I had been writing, and I had also been doing some types of writing. I had published a smaller book with Africa Christian Press in Ghana. And therefore, the whole idea of writing was with me. In fact, the reason I was in Kenya at that time was all because of writing. And so I knew that I would be doing some major works, especially in the area of writing novel, but I also have written quite a number of nonfiction also. My first book that is under discussion, I wrote the entire thing in Kenya between 1987 and 1988. Now that's quite some time passed, and of course I've been writing since then. The topic was child abuse, and then giving hope for a child who has been abused. The topic came to me because I had interacted with orphans on 2 occasions when I have seen children going through very difficult situations, both in the village and also in town. That's my experience. I realized that I wanted to give them a voice. I wanted to say something for them. Those two orphans who were being maltreated by their step-parents, their stepmothers, did not have any voice at all. So when the opportunity came to me, I thought about it. So get this point. We write from the known to the unknown, all right? Now, being able to write from my experience tells you that it gets interesting when you are writing from an experience that you know, and then you can do research into areas that you do not know. The title I gave, the working title was Grief Child. I always have a working title. I was very pleased when the publishers tried to change this title, but somehow they were able to just maintain it. Now, the other point I want to make is that I developed a serious passion for this project. Because I had a passion for it, I had an interest in it. When you are passionate about something, you have an interest in it. And so that interest also created commitment. And I was able to derive inspiration for that. So when the idea came for me to write a book, I had a passion for it, I had the interest in it, and then I had the inspiration also to write it. It is all by God's grace, and then we give him the glory. Now, one of the things I do, and I think I started this way back at that time when I was beginning to write, there is a principle, or if you want, a concept in writing called pre-writing. Pre-writing is the process of simply thinking about your subject. I mean, simply thinking about your project, and then from time to time, jot things down. I do a lot of pre-writing. That is, before I actually sit down to write, I am already writing the book in my mind. Currently, I run a newspaper column, and I am constantly having to be writing. And sometimes I will think through the whole subject before I actually sit down to write. So when I sit down then to write, I'm simply, as it were, pouring out from within me what had already been conceptualizing, just thinking through. So I would advise every up-and-coming author to practice pre-writing, because see, if you sit down to write and you do not already have what you want to write inside you, that is when you dry up so very quickly, because you had not been thinking about that. So during the time I was writing the Grief Child, when the idea of doing the Grief Child came to me, my first novel, I did a lot of pre-writing. I had no idea at that time that pre-writing was going to be a major part of my writing life. Okay, so pre-writing is, it helps you to develop your topic, and then it gives you ideas, see? Because the more you think about your subject, the more you have the ideas. And then you are asking yourself, what about this? What if this? What if that? Think about the story of the prodigal son, for example. If you turn it over and over and over and over in your mind, you will have a bigger book in your hands than the short story that the Lord Jesus Christ told, because you are thinking about it. So I developed what I called ITEC. ITEC is a kind of an acronym. It runs through all my writings over the years, but it began like that. Now, the I in the ITEC represents interest. Now, interest, when you have an interest in anything, you do that thing with a lot of passion. You revisit the topic and you consider it. Somebody has said that what is written without interest is often read without passion. See, if you are interested in your subject, it will show in the way you write it. I mean, it will come up, you are passionate about it, you make time for it, and then you do a lot of research. So working with young people helped me to develop this book because it was about a young person. And I used my experience over the years working with young people, with Scripture Union and church youth groups. So I was able to kind of develop a lot of interest in young people. And so when I was writing about this young person, the interest I had already developed for young people showed up there. Now, ITech, so interest, and then time. My dear brothers and sisters, time is paramount in the vocation of writing. If you do not have time, then you are not ready to write because you got to have the time for it. Okay, so I realized that even though I was in Nairobi studying full-time and also working full-time, now I've always wondered how possible it was for me to be studying full-time at Daystar University and then at the same time working full-time. I don't know, but it just can't. But I still had to carve time to be able to write. And I wrote mainly in the evenings and also at dawn. So time is of paramount importance. And if you are writing a project and you find yourself spending so much time on it, then you are on the right path. Do not suppose that you can write your work without developing time for it. Now, ITech. So I combine my studies with my writing, and then as for time, where do we find time? When you stop what you're doing, you have time. But also, when you rearrange your priority, you have time. The concept, the idea of writing that novel was so strong in me that I had to create time for it. That's why I started by saying that there's a need to create an interest in your subject. If you create an interest in your subject, then you are likely to make time for it. People have time. When you hear people say they don't have time, what it means is that they have time for other things, but not time for some other things, right? I mean, because the 24 hours is all we have, and you just need to rearrange. Writing is time consuming. And if you, as I can watch you, brothers and sisters seated out there, and I'm just imagining you, each one of you having a project. If the project is going well, it means you have made time for it. If your project is not going well, then you have not made time for it. And not making time for your writing translates into you abandoning the process. If you don't make time for it, you will soon stop because you will lose interest in it. Now, I said ITech, so interest, time, energy is simply having the strength for it. Energy is tiresome. So energy, you've got to make, you need strength to be able to do that. It's hard working. I'm sure some of you may have heard that the overused mantra that says that writing is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. The perspiration is the wet bits, okay? But it is all nice. So, all right, so that's it. So you have ITech. Now the C there is commitment. And as for that, there is no way you can finish any project if you are not committed to it. So I made sure I was committed to this project. I was writing, I made time to write, and I had a commitment to it. I had to guard against losing interest. And then commitment means never giving up. And then I also was committed to finishing the project. I could spend hours trying to give you inspiration about finishing writing projects, because I know of many, many people who begin projects and never get finished. But finishing is the name of the game, okay? Then I also, so that's commitment, all right? I had to guard against negative comments. You know, when you're writing, just guard against negative comments. Guard against disillusionment. You can start a nice project, you have the interest from the beginning, but down the road, you get disillusioned. In fact, disillusionment is the reason why some people have backslided from being Christian, because they started by receiving Jesus Christ very lovely, joyfully, but down the road, they began to lose interest in the Lord. Maybe, and that's how it works. All right, so please let me just run through the rest. I have the writing process. Now, I noticed early in my writing that anytime I started to write anything from A, then I move on to B, then I move on to C, I'll get stuck. So I don't write chronologically. So if I was writing the story of the prodigal son, for example, I could suddenly just start writing from when he went to take care of pigs. All right. I know I am going to write about when he approached his father for his inheritance. I know that very well. But, you know, writing chronologically, trying to finish A before you move to B, before you move to C, it is very tiresome. You can lose zeal and vim from there. So what I do is that I have the package of the story within me, and so I can start from anywhere. And as I write on, if I lose steam, I put that aside, take another section or another area and start developing. Now, after I've done all of those bits and pieces together, then it is easier to rearrange what you have written in those pieces than to try to write chronologically. Then I also realized that I had to abide by some basic principles for writing the novel. You would have been told about character and the plot, and then your theme. Maybe you have also been told about dialogue and the description. These are all principles of writing, and you can have it also in nonfiction. So I had to stay by it. I got this from the earlier fiction I did for Africa Christian Press earlier on. An editor told me that the characters I had written were ghosts. You know what a ghost is? Yeah. A ghost has no flesh, it has no body. A ghost is just some form of vapor or smoke. Now, that statement got me thinking. I set out to write about people, not about ghosts. Your character, flesh and blood. Give them something to be doing. Make them real. Make them realistic. So anytime I was describing the boy, I remembered those that I knew, boys that I knew. And then I made sure that I incorporated into their life activities that made them human, okay? And not ghosts, right? So you get this from the principles of writing, and that helps. Now, the editor told me this. He was later on feeling apologetic for saying that my characters were ghost-like, but I love that editor because at least I got the real thing, you know, it helped me so much. Okay, so, but let me tell you about rewriting. Rewriting was part of the process of writing. There is nothing like a good manuscript. Good manuscript is just a process of the rewriting bit, write and reshape and organize. That's why you don't put the full stop to your manuscript and then rush it to a publishing house. Then of course, while I was doing this, I was actually, another critical thing was, I constantly asked myself, where would I be publishing this work? It was part of the process of writing. So every time I was writing, I was thinking, who is going to publish? Who are going to be my publishers? And so on. So I had the opportunity also to pray about my writings. Why do I pray? I pray because I know that I need God's guidance and direction. Okay. And then writing for the Lord makes me feel that this is a calling, because writing is a calling. It's a very, very important calling. I mean, if Paul had never written, we would never have known the ministry and the mission of Paul writing. Okay, so maybe I'll just stop here, and then you can ask questions, or you can also kind of have Joan say what she has. These were part of the process of writing for me.
All right, thank you so much for that, Lawrence. And you know what, you are raising fundamental and critical questions that we also use as authors and publishers. And probably let's slide down to Joan. I want to know the process you had to go through for you to be fully published by a traditional publisher.
Yeah, thank you, Jonah. And yeah, thanks, Lawrence. That was really interesting, and quite a bit of it really resonated with my process as well. My process really was, I just had I've always loved reading, and I just had such a desire to write something myself, but I wasn't quite sure what. And it wasn't until I was reading C.S. Lewis. I'm sure some of you are quite familiar with his work. I was reading to my children, the Chronicles of Narnia, and I just thought to myself, that's the kind of writing I want to do. So it's interesting. It's not quite the same as Lawrence, who said, you write from what you know, because I actually ended up writing fantasy from a Christian worldview. And it was just a genre that I found so fascinating. My girls really enjoyed it. My young teenage girls really loved it, and I wanted to use that element of story to convey truth and to point people to Christ. So I had a notion of I had a bit of a story idea, and I knew kind of a few of my characters, and I knew also kind of where I wanted them to go. But for the rest, my process was very much quite different in a way. I didn't do a lot of pre-thinking and pre-planning, and I kind of spent a lot of time getting to know my characters. It's something Lawrence also said, how important it is to get to know your characters. And I really fleshed out my characters. I spent time doing that. And then once I had my characters, I kind of let them loose. It sounds a little strange, but I kind of just let them loose, and I wrote kind of what they did. So there wasn't a huge amount of planning. I just kind of let them, run the story, and I was just kind of recording what was happening. And I think what made it so interesting for me is that it's a little bit like reading a book, and you're not quite sure how it's going to end. That's a little bit how writing was for me. I wasn't quite sure what my characters were going to do, and it was really fun. And Lawrence talks about the commitment. Well, for me, the commitment was I wanted to know how my own story was going to end. So that was kind of how I ended up going about writing. But I really had to learn to trust that process, which is I've written 6 books now, and it's still my process. I can't write any other way. So I think if you're writing, I would just encourage you to explore your own process. Lawrence talks a lot about, how much that pre-writing was useful for him. For me, I had a totally different process. And so you have to really start to learn to trust your process. And I loved that. I really enjoyed the writing. I think for me, the very difficult part was finding a publisher, because you kind of, I don't know, I had quite a naive expectation that once I had the manuscript, I'd be able to find a publisher. And that took a number of years, actually. And Lawrence also mentioned the rewriting. It was also how I ended up going to Lit World in Kenya in 2012. And I met a British publisher there, excuse me, who spent some time looking at my manuscript. He gave me incredibly valuable advice on how I could improve it. And so I went home and I completely rewrote it. And I think then I had a much better manuscript, a much stronger manuscript. And the other thing that happened at Lit World was that I connected with an author, Robin Gunn, who who was really who knew the publishing world very well. And she actually kind of connected me with a publisher who only published Christian speculative fiction, so fantasy and sci-fi. And in the end, that's how I ended up getting a contract for that book. So, but for me, that was the difficult part. Was I think that's the most challenging part is getting that publishing contract. It was really difficult and disheartening often, and you just also had to keep. Lawrence, it is so interesting. You speak about, I think, in both the writing process and in that, road to publishing. You have to keep not listen to all the negative voices. But I found for myself the most negative voice was inside me. It was all my own doubts, as I was writing and as I was journeying that towards publication. Yeah, that's me.
Thank you.
Yeah, but can I just add a bit of she mentioned Lit World, and my manuscript, because I was passionate about wanting a publisher, I actually carried my manuscript to Lit World in the UK. And that was when I met Lion Publishing, the international acquisitions director, and it began from there. So that point there is the whole idea of networking. See, because you want to get your book published, you do everything possible to be able to get it published. And that includes having your manuscript completed, and then you have it on you wherever you go. Now it's easier to carry on a pen drive, but in those days in 1988, you had to carry the whole manuscript in copy form, and then I showed it to the editor, and that was when I got the contract. So yes, these kind of meetings, like where you are now doing these workshops, if you already have a manuscript there, Ramon is there. Talk to him. For he might be able to connect you to somebody. So networking helps.
Thank you so much for those insights. I loved it, Joan, when you talked about the negative voices. I thought probably these were external negative voices, only to discover that they were residing right inside of you. But now the question becomes, have you fought those negative voices since you are now a selling author and you're published?
Are you asking me? My negative voices, they're still alive and well. I don't know if they ever go away.
We'll find someone to kick them out. Okay, thank you so much. I see the audience is itching to ask you questions before we go on to our next question. Is there anyone with a question to our audience? If you have one, please show me by your hand so that, you can ask questions. Anyone who wants to ask a question, please come down. Yep. If you have a question, come down. Please come down. All right. All right. Let me ask on their behalf. So the question is, how was it like, Lawrence, to work with an editor? What were the processes? What were the hurdles, the fights, the disagreements, the excitement? How was it like? Give us the process of working with an editor.
All right. Thank you very much. Let me just a little bit highlight on what Joan just said about the negative voices coming from within. And congratulations, Joan, for being able to fight that negative voice, because it is the enemy for many people. You write and then you self-distrust yourself. You don't believe in your ability. You lose courage. You think what you are writing is just chaff. You know the story of Nehemiah building the wall of Jerusalem, and Sanballat and Tobiah came to them and said, "What are you doing? This thing you are building, even when a fox runs over it, is just going to crumble." Now, that voice came from Tobiah, and Sanballat, but it can come from within. And that is very dangerous for you as a writer. We just have to continue to, strengthen ourselves like David would do. David, the word of God says that David got up and strengthened himself, and then he moved forward. Now, working with the editor, and I do remember our friend Robert Rickey, the late Robert Rickey, who told me that, Lawrence, whatever you do, you must have an editor. Editors are writers' companions. They are our friends. I told you the first manuscript I submitted to a publisher, to an editor, the comments were so negative that the editor wrote on the edge of the paper, please do not show this to the author. And the publisher went ahead and showed it to me. But it helped me, understand? It helped me to see my weak points. I was just a beginning writer. Even now, I still make those weaknesses here and there. So the authors, the editors help us to shape our work. There are two types of authors, editors that I have encountered. There is one that is mainly for developmental. We have developmental editors. They may not do the copy editing for you, but they look at your manuscript and they do all kinds of shapings. So when I finished Grief Child, I sent it first to Henneman because they were in Kenya, and Henneman is the publishing house that publicized or popularized the African Writers series. And all the time, I wanted my book to fit into the African Writers series. So I sent it to Henneman in Nairobi. Now, they read my manuscript. They did not accept it for publishing, but they made such vital input in terms of suggestions and how to move the characters and things like that. And then they told me a story. Many of you may have read Things Fall Apart. When Chinua Achebe presented the manuscript for Things Fall Apart to Henneman, it was a big book that comprised both Things Fall Apart as we know it today, and then No Longer at Ease, Achebe's second book. So it was editors who told him, this your manuscript is two manuscripts in one. And the story of Okonkwo and make it one book, and then start the story of Okonkwo's son, because Chinua Achebe had made Okonkwo's son to inherit him, and he went to school and all that kind of thing, and he made it into one book, and he said no. They said no. The editors made him to divide it, and so there are two books. Things Fall Apart would not have been Things Fall Apart if the two of them had been combined, because then it would be such a boring, long, rambling story book that will not have appealed to readers the way Things Fall Apart has appealed to readers. In other words, you will have editors make an input into your manuscript, and that's what I had.
Lawrence, can you hear me? Are you still connected? Hello, Lawrence? Looks like, John, can you hear me?